Good evening, Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Hilaal Live. My name is Faraz Patel. We'd like to thank you, the viewer, for staying with us. I'd also like to thank my colleague Lukman Shadrack for taking you through that first part of the show. Now, today, of course, we're dedicating 24 minutes to an event that had happened earlier this week, and that was, of course, Cabinet giving the green light for PetroSA to partner with Russia's third largest bank, Gazprombank, to restart its gas-to-liquids refinery in Mossel Bay. Now, the 45,000 barrel per day Mossel Bay GTL plant has been under care and maintenance for several years under dwindling offshore gas resources meant the plant could no longer operate. Now, PetroSA has been looking for investors to try to get its flagship plant working as South Africa frets over security of fuel supply following the closure of its two largest refineries, SAPREF and NREF, due to accidents and business decisions. Now, Gazprombank is also a bank that is under sanctions over Russia's current conflict with Ukraine. Now, to break down all of this, I'd like to welcome PetroSA's acting CEO, Sandisiwe Ncemane. Ms. Ncemane, good day, and thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live.
Good day to you. Thank you for having me.
Now, it's an absolute pleasure. Okay, Ms. Ncemane, let's start off, of course, with the importance of this deal for fuel security here in South Africa.
And I think you've set the tone by just reflecting on where we find ourselves as a country and the extent to which refining contributes significantly to the economy of the country by the provision of energy, which remains at the center of the mandate we hold as PetroSA. And I think on also an important front, the socio-economic impact of the refining sector and the implications and impact of the reduction of refining locally. I think those are critical facts to reflect on as a starting point. And importantly, to also think of this in the context of the energy transition and the ability of South Africa to remain, self-reliant and resilient in the midst of a challenging landscape and an evolving landscape.
You spoke about obviously refining locally, and I think that's where obviously PetroSA would like this to be done locally, because obviously, you've got NREF and SAPREF were the previous refineries, and of course, they had factors of their own which would see them not operating. But the fact that it's being done locally is an important part of this, isn't it? That it's done in South Africa for South Africans.
Absolutely, and as I say that, I also want to highlight that in our strategy, we have taken a short-term, medium-term, and long-term outlook. Where in the immediate term, we are importing product, and we understand that that will remain a part of our strategy into the medium term, and we've got to blend that though with the increasing of refining capacity in the country. I mentioned this particularly in the context of PetroSA, where we are a gas-to-liquids refinery. The interfacing of the gas economy is a critical reflection point because we're talking about a transition that brings in cleaner technologies, that brings in alternative industries. And the gas economy for South Africa is transformational in that particular context. So I think it's important to keep in mind. But let me bring it back to the strategy of the organization. So you rightfully have given the historic context and the challenging landscape we have had to contend with as PetroSA. But we were quite firm in some of the strategic decisions that we embarked on. That said, in the short term, we've got to keep the lights on. We will continue to ensure security of supply, and that's through importation of finished product, through the facilities we hold and have access to in Mossel Bay and access in different parts of the country. In addition to that, we'd also focus on how we leverage and commercialize the gas resources that we are still producing from our offshore facilities for power generation, amongst others. And while we do that particular immediate short-term work, we keep in mind that the reinstatement of the refinery is strategic. And as we do that, we need to address also the feedstock aspect that you touched on in your opening remarks. In doing all of these interventions, PetroSA took a position that strategic partnerships are a critical enabler. And that sets the context around what is really underpinning the approach that we're embarking on. Now, I can also share that it is early days. However, we are seeing the green shoots. In the 2022-2023 financial year, we have been able to secure an audit result that is unqualified with minor findings. And secondly, are recording and reporting a positive net profit of 1.4 billion. I think those are clear and positive indicators that there are green shoots. We need to harness what we're doing. We need to proceed in the strategy and ensure that we are implementing for effective results and impact.
Ms. Ncemane, let's talk about Gazprom, of course, who have joined, and I'm going to touch on them a bit more, obviously, because they are partnering with PetroSA. The bidding process, how did you get Gazprom to be that preferred bidding partner with PetroSA?
Yeah. So let me start off by indicating again that PetroSA is a state-owned entity. We are a subsidiary of the Central Energy Fund, which reports into the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy in South Africa. And so we subscribe to the PFMA, which would guide the procurement processes that we follow, as guided by Section 217 of the Constitution. If you'd allow me, I want to just reflect a bit on that, which, if I draw an extract from it, would read as follows. When an organ of state in the national, provincial, or local sphere of government, or any other institution identified in national legislation, contracts for goods or services, it must do this in accordance with a system which is fair, equitable, transparent, and competitive. And so I thought it's important I reflect on that because it should give you the sense that as PetroSA, an entity that has achieved a positive audit opinion, we do commit ourselves to this particular provision of the PFMA.
I want to touch obviously on Gazprom. So, I mean, was Gazprom, I know there were various various other. I just want you to touch on Gazprom because why Gazprom? I mean, I know there were various other bidders that were involved, but why Gazprom? Why was it that PetroSA looked at Gazprom as the number one preferred partner for, of course, gas to liquid?
Yeah, and so as we went into this particular process, we also were quite specific that we do need a partner that comes with the technical competencies, the financial capacity. We also did specify that, importantly, as a state-owned entity, there is value and we derive benefit in a state-owned entity to state-owned entity company partnership. So those were some of the factors, over and above the commercial considerations, over and above the technical considerations. We also looked at these factors that said there is preference towards a partnership between two state-owned entities. So those are maybe a starting point. It was important that also as PetroSA, we look into our own capacity, what is the strength we bring in, and what type of know-how would then allow us to be able to actualize the project or be able to advance the project. And so, yes, there were responses and various parties responded. Through the defined processes, we assessed the responses from a technical perspective. As I mentioned, the commercial considerations at this point in time. We did conduct due diligence. We assessed what are some of the legal considerations in the current landscape. And I think with that, we then ensured we also engaged stakeholders, our shareholder, our ultimate shareholder, were able to advance through the respective governance structures and able to take this through to cabinet, which really resulted in the pronouncement that we then heard on Monday this week. I hope that does cover you to a large extent.
Yeah, it does cover it for now, but we are going to be continuing this conversation after the break.
Sure.
I'm in conversation with Sandisiwe Ncemane, the acting CEO of PetroSA. Do stay tuned to Hilaal Live. Welcome back to Hilaal Live. I'm still in conversation with Sandisiwe Ncemane, the acting CEO of PetroSA. Mr. Ncemane, right, so I want to break down it's Gazprombank Africa. Now, obviously, they are a subsidiary of Gazprombank, which is, of course, in Russia. Now, obviously, the USA and the EU and the United Kingdom have imposed sanctions on Gazprombank. My question to you is there a maybe concern that what these sanctions impose, it'll have a negative impact on South Africa? Now, I know you can't speak on South Africa and the United States' AGOA agreement, but my question is, in terms of the sanctions that have been imposed on Gazprom, is there not a concern of a negative impact with regards to South Africa and its economy with this deal?
Yeah, right. So let me start off by saying, as part of the due diligence we have conducted, we have assessed some of those legalities and sought to understand the applicable or the instances of sanctions, what exceptions and exemptions exist. And I think importantly, our ability to have then been able to engage various stakeholders afforded us also the ability to incorporate guidance from the Department of International Relations in the country. So at the stage that this particular submission from PetroSA was then considered at Cabinet, the country-level factors then would have been brought to the fore and afforded an opportunity that those are ventilated. And it is from that context that I would then respond to say, I think from a prudence perspective, adequate attention has been afforded. I think the assessment of the impact is taking place beyond a PetroSA level. And I think that's what gives us also a sense of it is a country project, and those factors sit beyond the organization itself. I think what is a powerful instrument we need to also familiarize ourselves with, and I'm speaking more broadly as South Africans, is an understanding that the South African position affords that South African companies are able to transact with companies from various countries, including Russia. I think that we are BRICS members, also BRICS Plus members, also does talk to that. Additionally, we would also need to ensure we are affording time to understand and build our awareness around the applicability of sanctions, therefore, to South Africa, and even what are the exemptions in the instances of the US, in the instances of some of the European countries.
Mr. Ncemane, you mentioned earlier on, of course, that a lot of it is going to be sourced locally in terms of the gas to liquid. The question I want to ask is how much of it is going to be sourced locally? Is it going to be 100%, or is there going to be a small percentage where, look, it's going to be obviously Russian influenced, and maybe some of it will be coming from that part of Europe, of course, being the east of it. So can you maybe break down the statistics and numbers with regards to how this will be sourced in terms of locally and maybe from Russia?
Yeah. And I take it in particular to feedstock.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah,
and drive the refinery. Yeah. So I think it's an important component of the visibilities that are going to be advanced towards FID. And considering that the refinery is able to consume gas feedstock as well as light crude feedstock, we need to assess in terms of what are some of the considerations from the local as well as international sources and from different geographic locations. I think these are the aspects that are going to also be driving the commercial case, underpinning the business case that would really inform the FID decision. I think we must keep in mind as well that the South African drive is to unlock indigenous gas resources. There is a gas economy that South Africa wants to build that would essentially see the growth of not just refining, but the energy, electricity sector, and also gas being utilized to drive various industries. I think it's a critical part to keep in mind when we ask ourselves what the impact of the reinstatement of the refinery would be in the short term as well as into the longer term.
Mr. Ncemane, I want to bring your attention to a recent Carte Blanche documentary, and maybe you could expand on that. So we know that in Mossel Bay, there is a community, and of course, a community which, economically is not at a strong point. Many of them are bemoaning the lack of opportunities and employment. With this Gazprom deal, do you foresee potentially these communities within Mossel Bay playing a role, getting employment, and actually really being part of, the contribution of the economy within their communities? Do you foresee something like that happening for them?
I think local refining, and you've mentioned not just PetroSA, you've mentioned the impact of SAPREF and REF coming offline in the economies and immediate surroundings and associated ecosystem. And that is a similar consideration in the case of PetroSA. That is also a national company. There's probably a couple of key messages I want to share. Yes, the refinery is located in Mossel Bay. And from some of the statistics that we hold, in 2015, we were running about 67% of our nameplate and contributing to the South African economy at about 0.6%. And that estimated was about 24.8 billion rands. So I think, and it's also in that same period, from a jobs perspective, PetroSA was contributing about 1.4 direct jobs with a broader job impact and a sustained job impact of about 28,000 jobs. So yes, the impact of reinstating the refinery would be quite significant. Our initial assessments talk to a job opportunity to the tune of 2,000 direct jobs and 4,000 jobs associated with the construction phase. Now, with the detailed feasibility work that we're advancing, we'll also be able to further unpack the socio-economic benefit in terms of not just the tax and royalties that would be realized in the country, but also the other industries that would come about as spin-offs, the petrochemical sectors that would be reignited by strengthening the local refining capacity.
Mr. Ncemane, right. So petrol currently right now stands at 22.79. I'm talking about inland, where we are here in Johannesburg. I know there's external factors that are beyond the control of both you and I. There is, of course, the price of Brent crude oil and, of course, the rand-dollar exchange. But now with this happening, with this deal that has occurred, can South Africans foresee potential cheaper fuel pricing in the future? What are the chances of that happening?
And indeed, we want to be able to unpack all the benefits that would be realized by the country, by its citizens with increased refining. And I think the ability to have stronger levers around the cost of fuel and the cost of petroleum product in the country, I think is strengthened by having a good balance of local refining as well. And so in that regard, I think our studies, our assessments would better quantify that particular potential. But I think it is important to keep in mind that there is a myriad of benefits which include value creation for the country, even from a cost perspective.
One final question, Mr. Ncemane. PetroSA has gone through a lot of challenges. It hasn't covered itself in glory in the past, but you've mentioned now, of course, the books are looking good. Things are looking on the up for the company. Does this deal potentially put PetroSA in a more positive light, in a sense that this can boost the company in a way that probably yourself and the rest of the board of directors would like to see it going?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for PetroSA, there is a benefit in being able to reinstate our refining, be able to increase the revenue streams, be able to increase our capacity to cover our obligations and become commercially sustainable. And I think it's important I say this because we hold a dual mandate of a commercially sustainable entity that is also contributing to the developmental objectives and the transformation of the energy sector. And to be able to effectively do that means that we need to be stable, a stabilized, sustainable, financially balanced organization. And the reinstatement of the refinery to a significant degree would afford us that particular leeway to be commercially sustainable and able to meaningfully transform the sector.
Ms. Ncemane,
I think I want to, if you'd afford me, and to of course be a critical party in ushering the gas economy for the country and the region.
Ms. Ncemane, thank you so much for joining us here on Hilaal Live. Much appreciated.
Great. Thanks so much. You have a good afternoon.
You have a good one also. That's Sandisiwe Ncemane, the acting CEO of PetroSA. After the break, I'll have you latest in news, finance, sports. Do stay tuned.